Hi, welcome everybody. For September lecture, something new and different. This is exciting. I don't know if we've ever done fall lectures, but we have, yeah. It's been a while? Okay. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Jody Batchelder. I'm the vice chair of Old Bristol Historical Society. We have a bunch of board members and ex-board members, retired board members here tonight. So we just want to welcome you. This is something new. We are collaborating on this presentation and our next one with not Old Bristol, that's us, South Bristol Historical Society. So that's pretty darn neat. And we hope to do more of that in the future. We collaborated with Lincoln County Historical Society Association in the spring. We did 2 Zoom presentations with them, and we hope to continue that collaboration as well. So that's kind of a real neat thing for us. And in addition, just to celebrate that, we made this lecture and the next lecture free for everybody. So that's pretty neat too. Before I introduce my partner in crime here, I just want to remind you that bathrooms, if you go through the double doors on the left, there's a bathroom on the left, and if you could remember to silence your cell phones, we'd be grateful for that. So I'd like to introduce, before we introduce John, Nancy Adams, who's been with South Bristol Historical Society for a long time, I think. She's the vice president now, and she's just going to say a few words.
Hello, everybody. I'm not a born native to South Bristol, but I got there as quick as I could. Age 2, with my parents and 2 sisters from Connecticut. But I'm a transplant and proud to be. So I just want to say that, first off, I want to thank Old Bristol Historical for collaborating on this event. Collaboration is a great thing, particularly when our goals are very similar. Protecting and preserving our historical sites and buildings and educating the public as best that we can. We have a number of events in the summer over in South Bristol, and I try to get to yours too. We're really trying to mingle more, I think, across the bay. But we are all on the Pemaquid Peninsula. We just happen to have a bay between us. So, regarding tonight's talk with John Roberts of Lincoln County News, I just want to say the South Bristol Historical Society is extremely grateful for a number of things at Lincoln County News. They print our event announcements for free, which is fantastic, because not every small paper does that. We rely on them for their quality publishing for our newsletters, reprinting some of our booklets, new booklets on history topics. We just had a calendar done this year where one of our board members worked directly with Alan Roberts to put the photos together. The originals were not that great, but he did a great job, and it's a great product. We're always looking for new things to put in our museum in summers for sale, things that are affordable, and the calendar came out really well. And in particular, I'd just like to say how much I love the online archive that has become available since 2019. Is that when it came out?
I think that's, yeah.
The News collaborated with Scadomfa Library, and I fall prey to going down rabbit holes. I can intentionally look up a particular thing. If I'm doing a newsletter story, I can find somebody's marriage or some event that happened, but don't look left or right, because you're going to find a story that is just as interesting and send you off on tangents. So that's why the newsletters take so long for me to put out. So anyway, I just want to say thank you all, and hopefully we'll do some more collaboration in the future.
Definitely.
Yeah. And thank you to Lincoln County News. You guys are great.
Thank you.
I did forget to mention that our October lecture is October 20th, so that's about a month. It's also Sunday night. It will be Carol Gardner talking about her book. And this is the story of Scottish prisoners of war that were taken captive during the English Civil War around 1650 and brought to this country as indentured servants against their will, forced to work. Some of them ended up in Maine. Many of them decided to stay, and they have descendants here today. So it's a really great story. So Carol will be here in about a month. But now let's get down to the good stuff. John Roberts. So I got a few notes because John didn't want to tell us too much about himself. John C. Roberts is in the publishing business. And even though his family's been in the publishing business for 5 generations, I don't think it was necessarily a foregone conclusion that John was going to enter the business. He graduated from Lincoln Academy and then went on to school at UMO to study electrical engineering. And then became an electrical engineer working for 13 years, but then decided to work in the family business. So started working there in 2016. Is it because the pull of the family business was strong?
I was still working there doing computer stuff, so I figured I might as well get paid if I made it my normal job. So,
That's what but on January 12th, 2023, he was named publisher and president, taking over the reins from his father, Christopher, who is here tonight. And Christopher. And actually, the family is here. Wife and 2 sons are here tonight, too, so I love the family support that John has. Christopher is not retired, though. He's publisher emeritus. I love that. And I think it may be a family tradition to not retire. So we hope you go. And John's brother Alan works at the paper. He's vice president and treasurer. His mother Paula works as the sports editor and takes all those wonderful photos that we all love. So it really is a family business. And he succeeded his father, his grandfather, I love this, his great-grandmother, Dorothy Roberts, and his great-great-grandfather, Samuel Erskine. So what a legacy. In addition to his duties at the paper, John has served as president of the board of the Damascotta Chamber of Commerce. So you may have seen that picture or seen him cutting the ribbon at the newly refurbished chamber building. And somehow in his spare time, he also serves as the fire chief for the town of Damascotta and has done that since 2013, which is incredible. And it's kind of an interesting phenomenon, I think, when a person who is reporting and sharing the news with us becomes a newsmaker himself, as he did, unfortunately, with the tragedy of the Schooner Landing fire. We saw John in the paper under those conditions as fire chief. As I said, he's married, he has 2 sons, they live in Damascotta. And Nancy and I are just kind of joking with him that we remember his mother Paula from Lincoln Academy from the field hockey days. She was quite a phenomenon herself. She was a senior when I was a freshman, so we didn't really play on the same team because, of course, Paula was on the varsity team, and I probably barely made junior varsity, but I just remember thinking that she was an incredible athlete. So I'm sure that she loves doing the sports editing today. So that's enough. And John is here to talk about the past, present, and future of the Lincoln County News.
thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and see so many people to come listen to my talk, I guess. As we go through this, please, if you have questions, put your hand up and I'll try to address them as you have them. We'll have hopefully some time at the end for other questions and answers, but I kind of jump around to some different topics, so if you want to ask your question when we're on the topic, that would probably be the best time. While I'm here speaking about the Lincoln County News, it's not something that's just done by one person or one family. We have an amazing group of about 32 people that help put together the paper and all the other products that we print each week. So We're missing about 3 pictures from here for some of the newer employees, but you know, I just wanted to start the talk with, I appreciate being here, but it's really representing all the great people that work so hard each week to bring the paper alive. So I want to talk a little bit before we get into the history about, you know, what our company really is, because some people don't realize that we print other things other than newspaper. So we're a full service printing company. We do offset and digital printing. We have a full service bindery, and we have more capability than any other print shop in the county. And we're one of 3 locations that can print color newspaper in the state. So what we have is becoming more and more unique as consolidation in the industry continues. And then again, we just happen to print and publish the Lincoln County News. So newspapers have changed hands, changed names a lot in this community over the last few hundred years. This isn't an all-inclusive list, but just some of the different titles that came up during some research. And you'll see that they last for 10, 20, 30 years, and then some of them kind of disappear, or they get swept up into other papers. So the Lilliputian was Wiscasset paper, and that became the Sheepshead Echo, which some people might know that from some of the archives. The Pemaquid Messenger, which was down here in Pemaquid Village, that became part of a paper that became our paper. And then there was a Seaside Oracle, a Lincoln Democrat, and then a Lincoln County News, but it wasn't our Lincoln County News. It was a predecessor that was a Waldoboro paper. And that was actually done by a postmaster who came back from the Civil War. He was a postmaster in Waldoboro and then ran a paper out of Waldoboro for quite a number of years. So what we have today as our paper really comes from many of the different changes in some of these papers listed here and some others. So trying to put together a map of what is the Lincoln County News today and what some of that history is. Am I blocking you? Can you?
It's okay.
You know, Jody mentioned in our email train that you know, there's some controversy or some concerns over volume numbers and stuff like that. So in 1875, the Lincoln Advertiser became a regular publication. Before that, it would kind of be haphazard as they had enough advertising to produce an issue. So that's the date that we use for our volume number on the paper. And that operated for 20 or so years, and then it became the Village Herald and Lincoln Record. And in that time, the Pemaquid Messenger got folded into that paper with the Goodwill and subscription list. Kind of similar timeline, the Lilliputian became the Sheepshead Echo, and I'll have another slide that talks about the Village Herald, but it changed its name to Damerscotta Herald, and then the man who owned the Sheepshead Echo bought out the Herald and decided to make one printing facility in Damerscotta. And then the Waldoboro Press was brought into the company in '67, and then it ceased operation as the newspaper in '68. So I'm not sure if I mentioned this on another slide. So we've been in continuous every week publication since February 13th of 1919. And that date is, there was a 1-week hiatus when the press was moved from Wiscasset, where the Sheepshead Echo was printed, to Water Street in Damerscotta. So that was the 1 week we missed before that.
It's a good excuse.
So focusing kind of on the direct lineage of Lincoln County News, C.H. Payne started the Lincoln Advertiser in 1854, sorry. And then Dunbar purchased it, and shortly after E.E. Dunbar purchased it, his brother got involved, and it was published by the Dunbar brothers. So in 1875 is when it became a regular production paper. And they changed the name to the Village Herald and Lincoln Record. But if you look at the masthead, it only says the Village Herald. And then on page 2, it would say the Village Herald and Lincoln Record. But if you just look at the top of the paper, it just says Village Herald. Interesting, it cost 4 cents per single copy, or I think it was a dollar for a year. In 1893, a man from Camden, Jesse Oger, purchased the paper. His heart was never really in this area, and when he had the ability to purchase a paper in Camden, he sold this one. But what he did was he brought in the Pembroke Messenger into the fold. And in 1898, George Singer purchased the paper and changed the name. And in 1919, a gentleman, Leon Gray, purchased the paper, changed the name to the Lincoln County News, and he died just shortly after that. And his wife, his widow, Alice, took over and found that it was more than what she really wanted to do, which was convenient for our family because in December of 1920, Samuel Erskine purchased the paper from her. She went on to be a columnist for, I think, the next 40 years or something, so she still was involved in the paper. So this was kind of where our family history started with the paper. So as mentioned, we're 5 generations into the ownership, and it started on December 9th of 1920 with Samuel Erskine, who's the gentleman in the picture. And then in 1943, his daughter, Dorothy Roberts, took over. Her husband, Francis, was kind of being groomed to take over the paper. He came down with tuberculosis and left her with 3 kids. Well, he had to go to an asylum. So she ended up taking over the paper and ran it for 20-something years. So I like to speak about it a little bit because, back in the 40s, women in a prominent location with a newspaper was not as commonplace as it is today. So she was kind of a groundbreaker. She did a lot of different things in the politics and something both at the local level and also at the state level. In 1966, my brother and my grandfather, Sam, purchased the company from his mother and ran it with his wife, Abby. And in 1992, Chris and Paula took over the ownership. And Alan and I are there today. Alan came there right after college, and I took a little bit longer. So from Alan and I, we have four kids. All of them have spent time around the paper. My 2 boys, Matthew and Thomas, are here. Matthew's helped out a few summers on Wednesdays. So we'll switch gears a little bit to kind of talk about where we've been within the Twin Villages. So I don't have pictures of where the different shops were in Wiscasset, but when we moved from Wiscasset to Damascotta, this is the location. It was on Water Street, which is kind of just behind the pizza place now, right in that same area. And then in 1943, there was one of the largest fires in the town's history, and it destroyed 6 buildings and damaged a bunch of other ones. It started at Weeks and Walt's garage, and the wind and the weather kind of swept it right through a good portion of town. So from 1943 to 1981, we moved to Church Street, which was right next door to the home of Dorothy, and a building was built next to her house to kind of run the paper. And then in 1981, we moved to where we're located now, which is in Newcastle. So the content's changed a lot. Jody asked me to speak a little bit about what the papers were like in the 1800s. Well, in the 1800s, you didn't have a lot of ability to get information from national or international circuits. So a lot of papers were had a lot of wire stories. So what that meant is they were getting stories on the Telegraph and then they were reprinting them. So this is how people would find out what's really going on, both at the state level and the national level, was through their local papers. So the papers would have a lot more information that was, I would say, a higher level than what we cover today. So there still was local news and coverage, but a lot of it was kind of more columnist based. So you'd have someone that wanted to talk about, here's all the people that came into town, you know, they celebrated a wedding this week and stuff, instead of being more of the news coverage. And they were usually, you know, 4 or 8 pages, as that's what the printing presses would do. They'd do a single 4-page flat. So that's kind of what a lot of them were, was, you know, a collection of the hot topics for the week. So here's a picture of the Village Herald. So over the years, a lot of things have changed since then. Pictures, for example, it was very difficult in the 1800s to try to really have pictures that were current. So nowadays, you take a digital picture and we're able to put it on a plate and put it on the press relatively quickly. Advertisements change. If you look down the left-hand side, you'll see that there's some advertisements on the front page. Well, there was only 4 pages, so there was fewer places to put them. But they also were just kind of typeset ads. They were not, you know, full of pictures or full of different graphics. And the news coverage focus was different, like I talked about. Instead of it being really the local news, there was a mix of everything, because this was really one of the avenues that people had to get all their information. A lot of people talk about objectivity of newspapers, like news industry now is expected to be objective and unbiased. Well, even 30 or 40 years ago, most papers had an affiliation. They were either a Republican paper or a Democrat paper. So our collective understanding of journalism and news and stuff has kind of changed as well, because usually the paper would have, and it's still in some names on papers across the state, whether it be a Republican or a Democrat paper. So that's a little bit different. And the number of pages have increased pretty steadily. We're running about 28 pages a week, and in the 1800s, again, 4 or 8 is about what you would get. And more recently, color has been a good addition to the paper to really bring you know, more clarity to certain pictures and advertisements. The other thing is, you go back and look at historical papers from the 1800s, you're not going to see a lot of bylines. What I mean by bylines is who's doing the story, you know, by someone else. And then, excuse me, the reporting staff is a lot different. There were not a lot of reporters on staff even 50 or 60 years ago compared to what there is now. So.
Can I just ask a quick?
Yeah.
I hear you correctly that even in the 4 to 8 page paper time period, they were coming out once a week?
Yes.
They're not dailies, they're once a week.
So if I talk about our papers and the history of those, they were always weeklies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So switching gears a little bit to the actual printing of the paper. In 1919, the machine that was moved from Wiscasset to Damerscotta was a Babcock press. I don't have a picture of the press, but I assume it's pretty similar to this. And then I also copied the account of the move that appeared in that first copy of the paper that was printed in Damerscotta. That the hiatus of 1 week was necessary because they had to shore up the floor, redo the hardwood floor. They had to build a Masonic column in the bottom to be able to hold up the 15,000-pound press in the room. So, one thing though that they mentioned is the workforce was retained. They didn't lay people off during the process of consolidating the 2 papers. They kept the staff on. So. So press is back. Then we're all letterpress. So does everyone kind of understand what that topic is? Yeah.
This is metal letters, or at this point?
Probably. There were wooden letters, but lead letters were used more commonly. So in the early days of letterpress, there were two different cases. There was a case for capital letters, and there was a case for the non-capital letters. We refer to them as uppercase and lowercase, and that's how they were displayed. That's how they got their name. So if you look, there was a case that had all the uppercase letters and a lot of the different symbols that was up on the top, and then the lowercase was physically the lowercase. So this changed, and I have a slide on that next, but one thing that's always interesting when you go and look through old type cases is the E's and the I's and some of the other letters have a much bigger hole than the other ones, and that's because there's a lot more E's used than there are J's. So there'd be very few J's, and they'd always put more letters of the more common letters within the case. So the other thing with this and linotype, which I'll talk about next, is when you're looking at the letters, they're backwards. Okay, so these are directly imprinted on the paper. So when you have the letters organized, they read backwards, like you're looking in a mirror, which makes it very hard to try to proofread if you're trying to lay out letters. Again, people are literally taking one letter at a time, and they're putting them down onto a block to arrange the letters. They need to space them and everything so that they don't fall out in the press. So it's a pretty time-consuming process. So the California job case is what came out next, and that organized all of the uppercase and the lowercase letters into one tray. And it was organized in a manner so that someone could take the letters that are most used quickly and put them down. And sometimes we bring around our proof press, but it was a little heavy for tonight. So it's basically a flat press that you have a hand roller, you roll over it, and it makes a proof. And that's what you would use to check editorially or to make sure, well, you had the paragraphs in the right spot, any typos. And then you have to make the decision, is the typo bad enough where we need to redo that line? So it wasn't quite as simple as it is today to make these corrections. Following the progression, the California job case was replaced by a linotype. So what the linotype was a typewriter type keypad, but when you hit a key, it would take a cast for a letter, and it would organize it on a line. And then when you were done with that line and you wanted to cast it, you'd hit the button and it would actually inject molten lead into the cast to give you one line of type. That's why the name linotype was used. And linotype operators were some of the most skilled and sought after employees because the amount of lines and the number of errors that they had were kind of the critical part to getting the paper out, whether it was a daily or a weekly. So the other thing is you had to try to keep track of what letters you had in that line, because if you didn't fill the line with enough space, it wouldn't hold the block together and you'd have lead shooting out at you. So
What's the time period for this?
we had linotype up until we stopped printing in the 40s. Right. Yeah, we stopped printing somewhere in that. I have a slide on that, but up until the point offset printing, it was letterpress printing. So for us, that was somewhere in the 60s. Any other questions? We don't have one anymore. Dad threw it out. So
Would they just remelt that for next week's use stuff?
yeah. So the lead was, completely recyclable. You'd take it after it was used. Might clean it up a little bit. You throw it back in the melter. I think there might have been a little slag that you had to remove or something. And so
Linotype would work off a 40-pound bar of lead, so we would melt it as you were going.
And Dad tells stories that when he'd go to trade shows with Grandpa, they'd send the kids over with a bag to see how much sample lead they could get from the places to bring home to use. So up till 43, we were using that same press that was originally moved over as a consolidation with Sheepshead Echo. After the fire of 43, Dorothy arranged to not miss a publication. So even though the fire occurred, I think it was on a Monday, we still came out with a paper that week. The headline actually was you see, the Lincoln County News looks like it's just letters, because it was just letters that week. They didn't have the normal look of it.
What's the building with the chimneys behind?
This one?
Okay, what's behind that?
That was that.
Oh,
The safe.
So following that, we were printed in Bath for a short period of time, and then the Waldoboro Press for about the 2-year period between 43 and 45. And then a duplex press was brought in from the Holton Pioneer Times in 1945 to the Church Street address. So it used soft-folded newsprint that came in by train. So my understanding is they drop a train car off in Newcastle up on Academy Hill, and they'd try to find anyone that had a van or a car or anything that could help ferry papers down, because we only had a certain amount of time to unload the rail car and then bring it down to the shop. And then in '64, the press shown there in the picture came in. It used large rolls that were about 70 inches in width. And in '67, is when we switched to the offset process, but we didn't have a press ourselves, so we started using the Courier Gazette out of Rockland, and then went to Brunswick Times Record plant. So I have a note here that, for 104 years of the Lincoln County News being used as the name, we've printed in-house for 87 of those. So so this is the time, before I show you the new presses that we have, on the change of what it was to put together the paper. So letterpress started with the movable type and then went to the linotype. And then there was a machine that would actually, you'd be able to go through a proofing process on a rudimentary computer. And when you had that process correct, it would provide you this ticker tape. And the ticker tape would have a bunch of holes in it. And you could feed that into a machine, and that would computer run the linotype to put out the lines, so that your proofing process was a lot better than, coming up with a linotype, lining it up on a block, putting it through a proof press. From there, we went, as we went into the offset world, everything became a little bit more on paper instead of with physical blocks of type. So we'd have computer set type that would print out stories in columns, and we still have a room that we call paste up, because when the process of pasting up the paper was a physical process, you'd take the strip of type, you'd run it through a wax machine, and you'd have these sheets of paper, and you'd line the type up, and then if you had to go to the next line, you cut it and you move the type up. With the pictures, you'd take a picture, you'd shoot it in a dark room, you'd put some sort of mask over it to make it screen so that it wasn't just a black image when it went on the press. And then you'd run that through a wax machine and you'd lay that out. So that's how the papers were laid out up until I think the late 90s is when we changed a little bit. So then the next evolution was we would start laying out the paper digitally, and then we'd print it and we'd get a negative out, and we'd take that in the dark room, we'd develop the negative, and we use the negatives to burn onto aluminum plates. And then today we have a process where you take the digital image and it's directly burned onto the plates. So That's kind of how the evolution worked for us. So the picture here is our grandfather Sam with a salesman, and it was the first CompuGraphic computer put in the state, which was around 1969. Before that, we had a Hendrix computer that took up the size of like the whole corner of the room. That would help. That was used for pretty much doing some type. It's one of the first computer terminals in the state of Maine. Had 4K of memory. So, and so at this point, when we started printing in-house again in 1982, our company formed a cooperative with the Booth Bay Register, the Tandy family, to buy a newspaper press that came off of Long Island, New York, and that was set up in the building on Mills Road. So the first issue printed in Newcastle was April 15th, 1982, and we've been printing in the same location since then. So that's the 7-unit King press in the new press room after it was moved. So for the first 125 years or so of publication, our papers really just had black ink. Sometimes there'd be a spot color, but most of the time they were just black ink. And in the spring of 2000, we added our first quadricolor, which could print 2 pages of color, only on the front. So after it ran through the front, we'd have to run it through a black unit to print the back of the web. And then in 2004, we added a second one to be able to do 4 pages of color. But it was like page 1 and 3 and 15 and 16, and then 2 and 4 were printed in black on the same process. And then we upgraded the press in 2017 to take out the 2 quadricolors and put in 2 quad stacks. And the quad stacks print 4 color on both sides at the same time. So I have about a 3-minute video here to show you, so I can get some water. And this is the install of.
You guys work fast.
Yeah.
Units there are the ones coming out. The secret has to go longer than that.
So that time lapse started on Thursday morning after we completed our publication on Wednesday, and probably the closest we've ever come to missing a deadline was that week. So we got to the post office, I think about 10 minutes to spare after that last bit. So there's a picture I'll show at the end of us. The last 36 hours were just a straight push to try to get everything done. So it brings back a lot of memories. So we did yeah.
What did you do with the old color?
We tried to give them away, and no one wanted them, so we scrapped them. So.
Another question.
Yeah.
They're called quad stacks, is that because each one of the layers is a different color?
Yep.
And then do they overprint each other? So like you print a blue layer and then you print some red printed over that to get the final color you want?
Yep. I think I have a picture coming up, but if you look here, there's a printing unit here, there, and there. So there's 4 printing units stacked on top of each other. That's why it's called quad.
And each page goes through all 4 of them?
And so the web will come up through, and it will go between 2 cyan blankets. Cyan is the blue color, and then it'll go through magenta, which is the red color, then yellow, and then black. So that's the color arrangement we have on our press. Some people print in a different order, but yeah. So it's printing with a color unit on each side of the web. So as the web comes up through, it's being printed on both sides all the way up through.
Is there also a black layer, or do they combine to make one?
There's cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Yep. So if you're familiar with, color spaces in the digital world, there's CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and then there's RGB, which is the digital color space that a monitor uses, which is red, green, and blue. So in 2021, we made the final change to our press line that we've done to date. So this was what the press line looked like before we started, and we were able to get a new to us folder, and another quad stack out of a printing company in Texas. So the folder's a lot beefier than our old one, and we still don't have the other quad stack quite online, but it's sitting there ready for us when we have time. So I'll switch out of kind of the printing process and talk about the process of the paper. So we refer to stuff as pre-press. It's everything before you go to the press. So our coverage for the paper starts with covering the local sports, the meetings, the news, and different events. And journalists capture these with written articles. We have advertisements that are designed or that come in camera ready and ready to go. And then we take them and we arrange all the pictures, the text, the ads, columns, press releases, everything like that, and we digitally arrange them on the page. We print them out and do a final proof. And then we have a machine that takes that digital image and directly prints it onto a high-grade aluminum plate, which can be seen here. So the process of making that plate is for offset printing. So we talked a little bit about letterpress earlier. Now we'll focus on offset. So offset involves having a plate or material that has an image that you can actually read. So it's not reverse. It's just like you're looking at it, and then that will get offset onto a rubber blanket, and then from the blanket onto the paper. So when it goes onto the blanket, it's going to be reversed like you're looking in a mirror, and then when it goes back to the paper, it will be back to a positive image. And so the way it works with our presses is we have a water solution that goes onto the plate, and the image repels water, and the aluminum accepts the water. So the water sticks to the bare aluminum that's left on the plate, and water and ink don't get along, so they repel each other. The ink sticks to the image, and then it's transferred onto the blanket, and then from the blanket to the paper. So I just have a couple much shorter videos of what the newspaper press looks like when it's running. So our press, we run at 16,000 impressions an hour. So that basically means we're sending out a paper every three and a half papers per second. So.
How many days does it, or how long does it take you to run for that week? A day or two?
So what we do for our paper, we run it all on Wednesday. So we start at 5 a.m. I meant to say when I was showing the install video that, you know, back then we had about a whole week because we printed just on Wednesdays. Now we're printing about 3 days a week for different publications. So we've started printing the Booth Bay Register again. So Wednesday we start 5 o'clock in the morning printing the Register and our back sections. And then around 11 o'clock is our target for deadline to start printing the front section. So once the front section is on the press, it's pretty much all hands on deck. Everyone comes in the press room. We start assembling the paper, putting mailing labels on it, strapping them to send them out for the different routes that people deliver. So, yeah.
John, how many papers, like how use do you print a week?
We're doing about 7,000 right this time of year. It will drop down to probably about 62, 63 in the winter, and then come back up.
What kind of quality control does that machine have? And that's so critical. Is it a lot of, a lot of maintenance or?
Yeah, there's a fair bit of amount of maintenance. You know, a lot of it is pretty mechanical, so as long as you're greasing and oiling everything, it stays running pretty well, unless you do something stupid like we did a couple weeks ago. So we were down for 3 or 4 days when we had a paper wrap. So as long as you avoid those things, things go pretty well. But again, most of it's mechanical, so there's just bearings and grease and stuff. We don't have a machine that has all the automation on the newspaper side that adjusts all the keys. It's all by hand. So I'll speak a little bit to registration in a second, but as far as ink control, there's I think about 20 keys per unit per side that you have to adjust in order to determine how much ink of each color goes onto the web at that point. So when we're running, we usually have one person per side, and their job's to pull proofs, look at the color, make sure the colors are all lined up, which is the registration part, and then adjust the ink density to try to keep within you know, a reasonable amount of color, which on newspaper is a lot different than on the commercial printing side. People are a lot more willing to accept a lower quality printing from newspapers than they are, you know, their magazines or brochures. So the first video was printing broadsheet. So that's like what our paper is broadsheet. This one, it gets quarter folded. So there's another little chopper that you might have seen in the video, and that's quarter folding the paper into a tabloid size. So tabloids around 11/17, and the broadsheets, whatever web width you're printing.
I had a question, just sort of following up on what Kathy said about quality control and things. If your machines go down, do you and other newspapers have sort of backup contingency plans to step in and help each other, or what do? You just panic?
There used to be a lot more options for backups. So I'll answer your question. I might get there in a roundabout way. There was a pretty bad storm 5 years ago. Most of the county was out of power. Power went out on like Tuesday morning, I think. So we ran a few home generators to have the computers go in to get the paper laid out, but we couldn't do anything. We were on the phone with CMP trying to figure out if they were going to restore power for us. And we talked to Portland about the possibility of them printing us the next day. And they said, yeah, we'll do your section in the morning. So we're like, okay. Power came back, I think it was 6:30 Tuesday evening. We said, okay, they're doing that one section. We'll get everything else done for us. We get everything ready. We call them up Wednesday morning. Hey, are you dropping that off? Oh, we didn't have time. So then we made plates and ran it. So, you know, I share that story because that was when there was more printing capability than there is now in the state. And as the number of presses and units get consolidated, there's less and less press time available for taking on extra work. So we've taken on some work for several different publishers around the state, but our closest, I guess, ally would be Ellsworth American. So when we went to get a new plate burner, we talked to them about what they had, and we bought the same thing they had, so that way we have some sort of backup capability. I say backup capability, they're 2 hours away, you know, so if you're talking about our plate maker going down and just needing them to do plates for us, you know, that's a 5-hour round trip. By the time you go up there, have them burn your plates and come back, that's not going to keep us on deadline. But they have a press that's usually has a pretty similar capability to ours, and we've made some goodwill with them because we've printed for them about 5 or 6 times over the last 2 years when they've had problems. So that's the best we have to kind of a backup contingency. But like I said, there's right now there's South Portland, Ellsworth, and us, and the next closest one is in New Hampshire, and they just closed Seacoast, which was in New Hampshire. It was a better printing facility than anything in Maine, and they closed that. So as the industry continues to kind of consolidate press lines, that becomes a more daunting challenge. So I think I got there right. So registration and color. The printing industry has very tight tolerances compared to a lot of other industries. And the reasons are your eye can see a lot more than you think. So if you have colors that aren't lined up, it starts looking like people have 4 eyeballs, or, you know, they just kind of have this ghost image off to the right. So registration and color density are kind of 2 important pieces to print quality. So I have a picture of our little elf scooter at home, and I just wanted to zoom in on it so you can kind of see what it looks like. So you kind of see there's a pattern there. So as we're in the process of laying out the paper, we have something called a RIP, and the RIP looks at the whole digital image and says, okay, this is how much color is in this little spot, and it makes 4 different dots, one for cyan, one for magenta, one for yellow, one for black, and it arranges them in kind of a circular pattern, which you can kind of pick up, I think, on there. So when we're looking with a loop to try to see how close the registration is, we're kind of looking to see if we're getting that pattern, and if the yellow or black or blue or magenta are in the right spot or not. So this is an example of especially for a newspaper, being right on for registration. So kind of outside the newspaper, on talking about just you know, the capabilities for us at the paper at the publishing company. In 2021, we put in a 5-color LED UV press. So what this is the ink is cured by UV lights. So we have LED lights in the delivery. So when the sheet passes under these lights, the ink gets cured right away, and we can handle the sheet. So before, the ink had to dry for an hour or two before we could really handle the sheet. If we tried to do too much with it, it would scrape off and rub off on the units. And this press is about twice the size of the old one. So with the same operator, we're able to do at least 3 times the amount of work on it. We have 4 digital presses and a number of finishing options. And I've got another real short video to show you on the newest one. So we talk about a perfect binder. When you have a soft cover book, that's a perfect bind. It's a glued binding. So that machine takes a book block and it runs it through a router, it roughs up the spine, and then it goes through a glue section and then puts the cover on and holds the cover long enough for the glue to set and then drops it out. Bless you. So one of the other changes that we're particularly proud of is in 2022 we went to what's called the develop on press plate. So the process of making plates, you have a photoreactive surface on the plate that's burned on with a laser. Well, you still need to develop the plate. You need to remove the other material that's there. So that always involves some sort of chemistry, going through a chemical bath and then scrubbing it and then coming back out. So the develop on press plates have no chemistry. So as we take the plate and burn the image on, we have about an hour of time under normal lights before it starts to burn the image on other places we don't want it. So as long as we keep those plates kind of protected, we can load them on the press, and then the first few revolutions of the press develop the image so that it doesn't wipe out. So we're always trying to find ways to be good stewards of the environment and whatnot. So both from where we get our newsprint, we use soy-based inks, and now we have chemical-free plates.
Where do you get your paper from?
I like to get it from Millinocket. They don't make it in Maine. We get it from White Birch Paper. Their headquarters at Greenwich, Connecticut, but their mills are all in Canada. So most of the paper we get comes from the Strathcona mill, which is in Quebec City. They use 100% of the wood chips that they use come from a waste process. So it comes from what the framing mills or whatnot are thrown away. So all the chips, we get 100% virgin chips is the only thing White Birch does, but it's all coming from waste streams from other places. So, and then newsprint, they only use hydrogen peroxide at that mill to brighten the sheet, so there's no chlorine or any of the more aggressive whiteners that go into it. So the web, we've been on the web since very early 2000s. We've been on there for quite a while, but in 2016 we changed the way we did it. We developed our own site in-house, and we hosted it in-house with fiber provided by Tidewater. So the other thing is while many papers and other publishers will show you the ads on what you looked at on Amazon for the last 2 weeks or whatnot, we don't have any national or even statewide ad agencies that buy space. We sell the space to the local businesses. Thank you. You know, we do it for a variety of reasons, but one are our advertisers are who support us, so we figure that they should be the ones that have that space. And then the digital advertising realm's kind of invasive to privacy, and we don't really want to be a part of that. So some of you might have heard that we did a community survey recently. We launched it in the end of June. We asked 22 questions seeking feedback and input on what we can do better or what we need to not make sure we try not to make better because we're already doing it okay. And so far we've received 897 responses. So it was pretty amazing to get that number of people commenting. So some of our goals were, you know, how do people really read the paper? Does it come and they just kind of throw it to the side for the week, or do they just need a place, you know, do they need to light their wood stove? You know, how do we rank? Do people appreciate what we're doing? Do they think that we're way out of whack? What things do they like the most and least about the paper? Are we missing anything? And are we doing enough? Are kind of the themes that we were trying to gauge during the survey. So this graph might not be very easy to read in the back, but I'll kind of walk you through it. The blue is where we were ranked excellent. The red was above average. The green was average. The purple was below average, and the peach color was poor. And starting from the left to the right, it was categories of journalism, photography, print quality, accuracy, relevance, and trust level. You know, looking through this stuff is sometimes pretty humbling because we think we're doing good things, but until people tell us it's you know, we're just kind of guessing. And we usually hear when we're doing things bad more than when we hear we're doing things good. So, yeah.
With the average age increasing nationally, and certainly within our county, I believe it's one of the highest average ages in the United States. What's being thought of in terms of the readability, in terms of the size of the type, the font, contrast, all the things that we struggle with looking at our computer screens or reading a book or a magazine? What sort of input have you sought or have you received in that regard?
We haven't had enough time to digest all the comments from the 197. We've been able to go through some of the data on the yes/no questions and ranking. That's kind of our next step, is to do that deep dive. I know that I recall reading a couple things that people said the type's too small and stuff. This kind of, and a couple people said this time the paper's too wide. So it gets into the efficiency piece, right? We can make the type bigger, but that either means press releases don't run, or something else gets cut, or we have to go up on the number of pages and that costs more money, and then we need to try to find something else to make up for it. And kind of the same goes with the width of our paper. Our press can print a 36-inch sheet. We print on a 33-inch web. If we drop down in size like most of the other papers have, you end up losing a column. Well, then you're either cutting out content, or we need to print more pages to have the same number of content. So some of those decisions are based on the efficient use of the paper. We haven't had a lot of people complain about our font size and leading and stuff. We've been using the same font for, I think, 20-something years. Yeah.
Do you have any sense of what percentage of people are reading online? Because I'm thinking, as you're saying that we can magnify the size of
Yeah.
the print online, but I'd rather read the paper.
I think I have a couple more slides that will speak a little bit to that, but
Sure.
I was just curious in regard to Jim's question or your response about the size. So I understand what you're saying about the efficiency, the cost, et cetera, of remaining the size width that you have. So what would be the incentive for other newspapers to be smaller? It seems like that would be a disincentive.
I think some of it comes to cost. So when I say efficiency, I'm assuming we're going to have the same amount of content. Now, if we printed on, let's just say we took one column, we went from 6 columns to 7 columns to 6 columns, and shrunk the paper costs become less because we're using less paper. If we stayed at 28 pages, everyone would still see a 28-page newspaper. They wouldn't consider that you're missing a column out of each of those 28 pages. So, I think it's the same as a chip bag that used to have 2 ounces that now has 1.5 ounces, right? So,
Most of that drive was from the daily papers, because the daily papers will sell a full-page ad. So a full-page ad is just a smaller ad, but it's still a full page, so they're getting the same amount. And they're saving the column and throwing away the amount that they cover for the readers. And threw that away, and still ended up with 20, whatever pages they were running, but they'd get more money because they were saving that piece on the side. And,
That makes sense.
and that was the big drive on shrinking the width of the papers, was they sold pieces, half page and full page. So if you make it smaller, you just raise the price of your ad, but you really didn't tell the advertiser that you raised it. But you've saved the money of production, but you haven't reduced your income.
But it sounds like also the editorial, the
Editorial
content
was less.
is less,
Yeah,
so.
less.
maybe-
Their answer was.
well, there's also
More tighter.
there's also number of sections. We're usually 2 or 3 sections. Some papers sell more. The cost for advertising is more on the back or the front page or of a section. So if you shrink the number of pages and do more sections, then you can have more things.
John, I almost think your microphone got turned on. It's not as loud as it was. Is that possible?
How about now? Still,
No.
it might be dead. I'll try to speak up. In all these categories, we were rated by 70% of the responders or higher as above average or better, which was very pleasant to see. And the trust level, which I think is one of the most important ones, 48% rated us excellent and 35% rated us above average. So that was good to hear. One of our questions was about political leaning, because I mentioned this a little bit earlier. We do really want to make sure that we're not injecting, our political leanings into what appears in the paper. The objective category is the big dark blue one. The conservative bias is the red. The liberal bias is green, and then the smallest levels are when someone felt we were very one way or the other. And what's nice is those slivers kind of cancel each other out. So I think we got confirmation that we're kind of shooting down the middle. So that's what we're aiming for. So reading approach, which comes close to answering your question. I didn't put a slide in about online versus not. One of the challenges is, to the point you brought up about an aging community, is most of the people that fill out the survey are over 65 years old. We didn't break down categories with over 65. We kind of left the 65 or older. So we did try to ask people about their reading frequency and how often they go online. And the number of people that don't read us at all online was, I think, about a third. And a lot of the other ones don't go online often. So a lot of the responders do mostly engage with us in the paper form, not online. So the reading approach, we asked, like, do you read cover to cover? Do you throw it on the desk? Or, and you can kind of see the top two charts here, our reading approach for everyone that filled out the survey on the left, and the people that identified as weekly readers on the right. And the data's pretty consistent that most of the people are reading the paper cover to cover. So one of my favorite stories from an advertiser was Todd Maurer, who owned King Iders, came in and he goes, our ad didn't go in this past week. I said, I thought it was going to be a bad conversation. I said, I'm really sorry. I don't know what happened. I looked at him. He goes, no, I just want to tell you, I've had 5 phone calls about people asking if we were okay because they didn't see our ad. And I'm like, oh. He goes, I wanted to share it because it got me thinking that for them to realize that our ad wasn't in the paper, they had to read the whole paper and see that our ad wasn't in there and recognize that our ad wasn't in there. So it speaks volumes to how people do digest the news. So one of the things we wanted to find out is, are we putting enough local content in the paper? So that was the content question that's down there. And most people felt that it was just enough, kind of the Goldilocks question, too much, too little, or just enough. So there was some people that felt a little too little and some people that felt it was too big. So the missing question, what are we missing? Are there gaps in our coverage? Almost 50% said that there weren't gaps in our coverage, but there was about 1 in 6 that felt there was. So that's part of the ongoing effort, is to review what those comments are to see if there's themes on what we're missing that we can try to address. And then the most and least interesting topics. So this is the most. So obits are obviously pretty high. You always got to read, make sure you're not in there. Breaking news and features kind of lead the top. And then the least, TV guide, church page, and then sports is always a shock. We've done this similar survey in 2018, and sports is one of those that shows at both a high number on most and a high number on least. And I think for the people that it's important to, it's very important. For the people it's not important to, then, well, they can ignore those 2 pages of the paper, I guess. But the TV guide piece is one that, it costs us money to buy that service that provides those listings. So I think we put in an editorial that maybe it's time for the TV page to go on the obituary page. But every time we bring that up, we get letters and stuff. Well, I really like the TV, so we're trying to figure out how to address those 2 or 3 people. But
Is the sports issue age-related?
I believe it's probably age-related, and it's probably, we do have a lot of people that move into the area that don't necessarily have a connection, so they don't have kids in school, or they don't have, so I think that's why they're not as interested, because they don't have that local connection. But I can tell you, when you go up to the schools and you see, the displays of all the pictures that were in the paper, it really means a lot to the kids. And those are really our future readers. So a lot of the decisions we make about how we move forward need to be, how do we integrate with the next generations to make them feel like they're part of the community. And so if they go off for work and they come home, that they know they've got a good home here. Am I doing okay time-wise, or? Yeah. All right.
I think people are very engaged, probably have a lot more questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. I'll stay as long as needed. So that was kind of it for the survey piece that I had for slides. But as we start talking about the future, it's how do we make sure that we have the financial footing to continue to operate a newspaper, and continue to operate. So, you know, I'm sharing with you guys kind of on the income and cost side. You know, about 75% of the income for the paper comes from advertising. About 16% comes from subscriptions. The rest of it comes from newsstand sales and other smaller things. And on the expense side, you know, about 5/6 of it is employment costs, and those have gone up a lot in the last few years. Only like 13% or so is material. And when I'm talking about material, I'm talking about ink, paper, postage, and plates. There's been a big push, especially in the state, by the state dailies to eliminate printing, because their distribution costs and their paper costs are a lot higher. But they're really pushing for an online presence. You know, the Portland Press Herald and Bangor Daily, they got rid of the Monday edition to it's digital only. But they have a much broader reach than we do. And I know the Washington Post and I think New York Times and some of the other ones have really done well at going to a subscriber-based model. There's not enough people that care about Lincoln County, Maine to go after a subscriber-based model. So we could make a lot of inroads, but even if we doubled the cost of a subscription, we're not really changing the size of that pie shape a whole lot. And what we're going to lose in people that can't take out a subscription is going to, you know, negatively impact both the numbers, which hurt the advertisers, and everything else. So, you know, I share that because if we reduced our material and paper costs, it really doesn't address the cost it does to actually produce the news. It's just we have fewer papers that are going out to share it. So we're very fortunate that, you know, we have a very strong commercial printing portion of the company that helps keep everything going. But where it provides an opportunity is we have some incredibly faithful readers that we're incredibly proud to have. What we need to do is tie that, you know, our future security and strength is in them realizing that our advertisers, you know, are what keep us going, and supporting those advertisers by the readers is the best way for our future to be prosperous. Yeah.
It seems to me that the big question, and I think the question you face is actually the question that organizations like OBHS and South Bristol Historical Society and so forth face, which is how do we re-engage and reinsert the importance of the historical narrative into the educational process, because most young people today don't even know anything about history prior to, you know, I'm not going to be overly judgmental, but let's just say that the whole issue of cause and effect is lost on a lot of younger folks.
Mm-hmm.
And that the lessons that come from history need to be somehow reintegrated into the educational process. And that's a bigger issue, but the young, how do I say this? Young folks are your future.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to continue to try to have a paper version.
And the school engagement's one of those.
And the school engagement, and what are the young youthful activities, and you're already doing that, but it's got to be so much more of a coalition of the schools, the press, working together. And so that the kids want to pick up the newspaper.
Yeah.
Or that the kid gets some sort of a newspaper flyer, or their contribution is getting into the newspaper so that they want to see what's coming out this week.
Yeah, so we had, we partnered with Lincoln Academy, I think 3 years ago, to bring back the student newspaper, the Eagle Talon. So I think that's been going on for 3 years, where they have a whole class that's, we'll send up a journalist to talk to them and give them pointers. They have a whole group that is invested as a club that come up with their own student newspaper, and we've been printing it for them. We did something similar at Great Salt Bay, but the teacher that was running that got either retired or went on to different things, so that kind of fell apart.
Yeah, in another lifetime, when I was a reporter for a small-town newspaper, sports, obituaries, and weddings were big. I never see many wedding stories in the Lincoln County News. Is that nobody's getting married? Or you don't have the nice form
Yeah.
to fill out with all the...
We're all too old.
So we still run engagements when people send them in. We'll run weddings when they send them in. As far as sending a reporter to cover weddings,
No, they used to have like a form.
yeah. So we're probably just not.
You don't do that.
We do it,
Oh,
but we're probably not getting letting people know enough. So we're one of the few papers left that don't charge for obituaries.
Thank you for that, too.
You know, Dad's dad, my grandfather, felt people ought to be able to come into this world and leave the world without, being hit on the wallet. So, we do birth announcements and we do obituaries. So now we did change our obituary policy a few years ago to put limits. We had a policy that said, don't do flowery language and stuff, but families get so mad when you change an obituary that the policy was just, we were offering a free service, and all we're doing is getting people mad at us. So we changed it to say, do whatever you want for, I think it's 300 words. After that, it's 28 cents a word or something, and we'll run a picture for free, but if the picture's not a headshot, then it's $25 or something along that lines, and that has made our lives a lot easier, because if someone wants to spend 1,000 words on explaining the loss of their loved one, they can, and we'll give them the first 300 for free.
so you don't have somebody who writes obituaries.
We can help, but a lot of the funeral homes do a very, very good job of it.
When I worked for the newspaper, that was how I started out, writing obituaries.
Yep.
So,
In a big city, though, you can count on spending $1,000 to $2,000 to run an obituary, and you'll find people aren't getting them anymore. So those of us who do things like genealogy, those people just die and are, a few generations later, there's no sign of them.
Yep. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of genealogy resources more important than obituaries, because they get you can pretty much just keep following it back if you have a good, strong local paper.
Has the circulation changed over the last 50, 75 years in any significant way?
Yes. If we go back to the 60s, I think our circulation was around 4,200, somewhere in that neighborhood. We crest in, I think, the early 2000s. I think we were almost up to 10, and now we're around 7. So, the early 2000s was kind of right before, the internet stuff started really, happening. So, we've been very stable. We saw a little COVID bump, actually. More people were interested in reading about local newspapers, local news during COVID, even though it was more difficult to get the paper. But that's kind of, that was a little bump, and now we're kind of about the same as we were before.
Do you ever run your local columnist, Heather Cox Richardson?
For which? What?
Do you ever run the columns by
Heather Cox Richardson.
I don't
She's out
recall.
she's out of New Harbor, and she's got her own Substack.
Yeah, you know, I don't think we've reached out to her or she's reached out to us, but Lori Crook does one for Round Pond that, you know, that she's done for a long time, but we're always looking for columnists. A lot of people find out it's not a paid position and then they're not as interested, so.
On the other hand, if you're trying to stay objective,
Yeah, that's a challenge.
they might not want Heather Cox.
We've had
She's great.
We've had challenges with some columnists that are not objective, and what we found is the general reader doesn't really care if it's a letter to the editor or a staff written piece or a column. If it's in the paper, they blame us for anything that's wrong with it. So we had people complain about an ad, a political ad during the last election cycle that we're still getting people complain about and say they'll never read our paper again because we ran an ad. So we changed our advertising policy to remove those types of attack ads because, you know, we saw it as a challenge that people expect more out of us. So maybe we ought to, you know, be on the other side of it. So.
I just wanted to say, I know I'm not alone in seeing this community newspaper as such an important part of our community. And I just wanted to share a little story. It's not even a story, but I went to college in Maine, but after I graduated from college, I moved away, moved out of state. And first thing, my dad subscribed to the Lincoln County News. And I got the Lincoln County News in Boston, I got the Lincoln County News in North Carolina, I got the Lincoln County News in Nebraska. He must have paid for my subscription to the Lincoln County News for 20 years. And I think I was 40 and moved back to Maine before he stopped buying. He said, you can buy your own Lincoln County News now. But it was so important to keep that connection to your hometown.
Yep.
Lilliputian. Who, was that a British guy that started that in Wisconsin? Because thinking of the little people?
Yeah, I have not been able to do a whole lot of research. I found it when I was trying to pull together this presentation that in the beginning the Sheepshead Echo said, I won't get the exact term, but something like carrying on for the Lilliputian or taking over for the Lilliputian. So I tried to look it up and saw with the Library of Congress that they had it listed for the date ranges that I put in there, and a few places where some of those, you know, libraries that might have copies of that, but I haven't been able to go to those libraries, and I didn't see that they had an online piece. So.
Just curious, how many distribution sites are there for Lincoln County News?
We have 7 routes that we drop papers off at. My guess is probably 45 to 50. Almost all of them are in Lincoln County. There's 1 or 2 in Warren, and there's a couple in Bath. But other than that, they're all in Lincoln County. Yeah.
Our kids get almost all their news online. Subscribe, well, one of them subscribes to the paper, a newspaper paper, but, their kids seem to get everything they want off the phone. And how do you deal with that?
I don't have a full answer for that yet. That's one of the things that we keep grappling with, right? It's trying to engage with the next generation, and some of them don't even really know what a newspaper is or what it stands for. And in the newspaper industry, I read something, I think it was last year, that the New York Times was getting rid of the op-ed because no one understands what op-ed is. It doesn't make sense in the digital world. It's like, well, then we ought to try to figure out a way to do the same thing as op-ed online so that the term still matters. But all these, I say uppercase, lowercase, some other things. These are like historically used terms that, imply something. You have the editorial. This is the editorial position of the paper. this is the opposite opinion, so you get exposed to both things. Like those, whether you use the word or not, those are important things to expose people to both sides of the argument. So it is similar to what you said on how do we engage them, and part of it is we're trying to figure out ways to get into the schools so that they can hold the paper and understand what a paper is. And I was talking to someone earlier that there's a different level of comprehension on reading when you're reading something that's physical compared to on a digital form. So, you know, I don't know if we'll be alone fighting a little battle in Lincoln County by ourselves, but those are some of the things that, you know, the industry needs to try to grapple with on the importance of the paper. And we don't really have a long-term survivability plan to be online only. We can't charge enough without advertising. And online advertising is even less effective than print advertising. Every study that they do, people find it more offensive to have online advertising, and they expect it in a print product. So those are the challenges that, you know, this is the last slide I really have on kind of what we envision for our future is, you know, to forge the tighter knit connections with the community, to continue to focus on the local. This is what sets us apart. You know, Portland Press Herald, the TV stations, they might swoop in and do the schooner story, but they're not here every day. They're not here meeting the people. The character of the county piece that we do is to me fundamental to what our future is those local stories that only happen here, and we need to be in a position where we're the ones that people come to share those stories. And then working on social media platforms so that they're supportive of the paper instead of competing with it. Because, you know, we share stuff online, we put free stuff online, well, then people don't buy the paper because they think that's all there is. Well, we only put a little piece for free online, but people think those are the only stories we have. So those are the things that we need to try to address. And then, like I said before, you know, going through the survey, what's become clear to me is, you know, the long-term health of the newspaper is providing that link between our readers understanding that our advertisers are what keep the paper afloat, and to have that support and to understand that buying local is an investment in the community, and we're part of that community. We'll either be successful or we'll fail with how the community supports itself. So with that, I said I'd show you my favorite picture. That's the picture of 36 hours of getting the press together. So I'm happy to answer questions here if anyone wants to ask questions afterwards.
Just as a quick observation, you may find that with young people, you need to find some other thing beyond news to get them to buy the paper.
Right.
Yep.
And to just get them used to it. And so, for instance, you want to be linked to local businesses, your advertisers. Maybe you can get a coupon there to places that they care about. It's the only place they can get it.
Yep.
So they at least get used to coming in there, then they might start to see some stories about their friends they're interested in. Before you know it, by the time they're adults, they're reading.
Yep.
That's the right idea.
Have you ever had a junior reporter?
We do summer interns. And so Dylan Burmeister's come the last 2 years. She's now, I think she's going into her senior year at Lincoln Academy. She was one of the ones that's been a real hard worker on the Talon. And she's going to be going, she says she's going to be going to college, hopefully in a journalism type career. So we've told her to plan on coming back anytime she wants. So we've been, you know, successful with that in some. We usually try to have 1 or 2 summer interns.
I was just thinking that if you had, you know, a column from Lincoln Academy, then maybe the kids be interested in.
They when we've picked up Talon pieces to run in the paper, the kids get super excited. So you know, it's a balance because part of being the paper of historic record is we have to cover the town meetings, we have to cover the select board meetings, we have to be there and try to make sure that we hold people accountable. But what we've seen on the online traffic and the interest is people all think it's important and it costs a lot of money to cover it, but they generally just, don't find it as interesting as the other stuff. So that's one of those struggles is, how we balance the resources we have to cover the things we need to cover, but then still put in all the things that people actually really enjoy. So that's the...
We probably should let you go home. Poor Matthew and Thomas have got to go to school tomorrow. This has been incredible.
Yes.